You're 6 years old, and you're running playing tag. We call it tag here.
Yeah.
And your 6 of your friends die. You talked about it like really quickly, but I think a lot of Americans can't even relate to that. Like a 6-year-old watching I mean, you've seen this happen. Did you get injured? What did it look like when this happened?
It was actually so when I was running behind these children,
Yeah.
and we are all laughing. They are in front, and I'm in the back of them. Suddenly, I got exhausted. A force stopped me, and I thought with myself that I should take a break to take some breath, and then run behind them with more energy and power. But during that a few seconds, I noticed that they were way ahead of me, and they already stepped on the cemetery, and a big boom. I heard a big boom. And the next thing I know is I was covered with dust. I lost my hearing, and I couldn't see. And I saw fragmentations over here from the sand and
Like
the
some
little
rocks on your face.
rocks and everything on my fingers, on my hands. And after a few minutes, I saw my grandfather hit me with the big fist on my face, and he was crying. And then I looked, all these children on the cemetery, somebody doesn't have a leg, somebody doesn't have a hand, somebody is blind, somebody's head is bleeding. It was very tragic, and it I saw all these mothers, all these fathers, that they from the valley they ran to the cemetery, and they were hitting their faces with their hands, and they were crying, and they were saying, "Oh God, what should we do? What happened to our children?" And because I was very young and I didn't have an idea what to do, I was very shocked. And that was the moment that I learned that we are not permanent on this earth. Life is beautiful, everything is beautiful, but then one day this ends. And that was the time when I actually really started searching for God. Like until that minute, I didn't know what's what. How, I had no information about God, about messengers, about religions, about the life hereafter. That was actually the kickstart for me to start searching for God. And when I heard that God is so kind and He's merciful and He is really powerful and He can see us, I was always searching and trying. Sometimes I would go to these mountains on the northern Kabul mountains. I would sit by myself. Actually, even in the childhood, I was totally a nerd. I wouldn't get along with the other kids much, like especially after that incident, because of the rage, the unhappiness. It took away all my joy from
Yeah.
that moment of childhood.
Is this common? I mean, would be common that kids in Afghanistan would face something like this. Because I remember, I mean, this is a long time from when I went to Afghanistan. This was probably like,
Yeah.
What year would this have been?
It was actually like 6 years after the invasion of the Russians that were over there.
So in the early 80s, or
80s, yeah.
not 80, yeah, in the mid
Yeah.
80s. So like, years later, I'm in Afghanistan, 2003, 2004 through 2007, and I still see these. You drive through places and there's these rocks stacked up, and one side the rocks are painted.
Yeah.
And that indicate there's a minefield there. Still mines left over from the Russians, and kids are playing all over.
Exactly.
And the kids know, like, hey, I could play here, but I can't play here. And then there's been several times that we roll. I was with you. You rolled through a village, and
Yeah.
kids are injured and missing body parts or dead because of landmines. And so this is life as a kid
Yes, exactly.
in Afghanistan.
Yeah, life as a kid, every day, like every morning it starts. Like sometimes during the week when we didn't hear rounds going off in the sky, and we were actually getting worried, like why there is no rounds coming off, why the fighting is stopped. Like maybe for a few days, sometimes they
Yeah.
would do a ceasefire. So we were that much used to it. Like you would see the children carrying guns. Like there is a gun in each and every house over there. There are grenades in each and every house over there. Ammunitions, pistols. I mean, all kinds of guns.
Sounds like Texas.
It sounds like pretty much like Texas. Yeah, exactly. But except it's more negative over
exactly.
there. It's guns are not registered. You don't have permits for it. I mean, it's leftovers from the civil wars, leftovers from the communist regime, from the Mujahideen and the Taliban, and of course now after the withdrawal of the United States Army. and some other unexploded mortar shells. Like if you remember, I was showing it to you, like when we were going to Jabat on the side
Yeah.
of the mountain. There are a few companies or organizations that they are trying to clear the mines from those areas,
Yeah.
but that's a lot of
Well,
mines
we,
to
we
clear.
I remember we drove everywhere. We lived in our vehicles and driving everywhere across the mountains. And I've always had like a weak bladder, so I drink a lot of water. I'm always having to pee. And you had taught me, like, instead of getting out of the car to pee, just to kind of open the door and just
Yeah,
turn my body. It's because you walk out on the side of a road, and
yeah,
the Russians had airdropped like all through Khyber Pass and those areas. They just
exactly,
airdropped mines
exactly,
on the sides of roads to keep from getting ambushed. And those
exactly.
mines are still there.
Exactly, those are still there, and I still remember my dad. He would actually make mines from the grenades. Like he would open the pin of the grenade a little bit and run a string like from one side and put the grenade on one side of the wall and put the string on the other side of the wall. Like every night, he was using these self-made grenades as a security guards. He was installing them around our house, especially when we were down on the village, northern Afghanistan, where by the Oldern Bagram road, because there was fear of the Russians coming to our house from the night. So he would install all kinds of mines to make sure to protect our family and the children and the area. And then at the same time, they would give us guns. We, at the very young age, they would give us guns to go sit on the roof all night in that hot or cold weather and just keep an eye open and observe, because the house was surrounded with these grapes, peaches, and farms. And it was very hard to identify the enemy if he could easily walk from the highway and just sneak in underneath those bushes and trees and then do military operation from the night. It happened to many of the Afghans from the night. Like one night we were sleeping inside our room, the Russians shot a mortar shell. It was this big. Luckily, we were all sleeping. I remembered that my grandfather is pulling me from the room, and I was really mad at him because one, every morning, early in the morning, he would wake me up before the sunrise. That was the habit of my family, wake me up to go and work on the farms. Two, for the prayer purpose. And thirdly, they were just making sure that everybody is engaged in doing something. But we hated that to wake up too early as a child. And that night, I'm like, dang, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and now you're waking me up to send me to the garden. What kind of a cruel grandfather you are? And he cried. He told me, Aziz, you have no idea what has happened. He was dragging me from the home and brought me down. When I looked my face at the mirror, it was all black because of this mortar shell that hit on one side of the wall, but luckily it didn't explode inside the room. We were on the second floor, and it actually exited from the other side of the wall and went and hit the garden. That's actually how the life was growing as a child in Afghanistan. Like that's just one example. I can tell you
Yeah.
several examples that I lived it. I lived it, and I personally saw it. I personally experienced it. It's really horrific. It's really heartbreaking. There was no education. There was no clean water. There was no actually medical system established over there. Like I remember they were using opium as a medication for the children, because when the children they would get sick, because there was no medications available, there were no doctors available. The moms, they would just use a little small tiny piece of the opium and give it to the children, mixing it with the milk,
Yeah.
so that they go to a deep sleep to stop crying. Because if the kid was crying, then the whole family was not able to sleep.
Right.
So I mean, there is many other tragic stories, like shortages of food. I mean, like I remember, like they would give us one pair of clothes, and we we would wear it the whole year.
Yeah.
Over here, I see children. I mean, shelves are full of clothes, full of shoes, full of sandals, sneakers, this and that, and they're still complaining.
Yeah.
In my time as a child, there was only one pair of clothes, and when it was getting dirty, you would take it out and you wash it. Even there was no electricity, there was no laundry machine. You would have to use a small bucket and use your hands and a piece of soap to wash your clothes and then hang it. And then there was no iron to iron it back at that time. I mean, there was many other challenges, life challenges, like uncertainties and unhappiness through the whole childhood over there.